Breaking reports have confirmed that a massive Ukrainian drone assault has pierced right through the heavily guarded airspace of the Moscow region, rattling the very heart of the Russian capital. Let's understand how Ukraine bypassed the world's most dense air defense umbrella, how this operation completely disrupted Vladimir Putin's iconic Victory Day pageantry, and why bringing the war directly to Moscow changes the strategic equation for the Kremlin. The crisp spring air hanging over Moscow's Red Square carried a tension that no amount of military choreography could completely hide. In May 2026, the month of Russia's highly anticipated Victory Day celebrations, a sacred pillar of Kremlin propaganda designed to project absolute strength and historical triumph. For weeks, the state apparatus had been tuning its massive war machine for the annual parade, a spectacle intended to prove to the domestic audience that the special military operation was going according to plan. But beneath the surface, the atmosphere in the Russian capital was thick with a creeping sense of vulnerability. To the average citizen, the city appeared as an unassailable fortress, ringed by multi-layered air defenses and blanketed by state-of-the-art electronic jamming. Yet for those calculating the trajectory of this war from Kyiv, Moscow was no longer a sanctuary, it was a target. Just days prior to the main event, the digital infrastructure across the capital began to fracture. Internet services flickered and died across entire districts, navigation systems glitched, and GPS signals placed civilian vehicles miles away from their actual locations in the heart of the city. This was not a random technical malfunction. It was the frantic, defensive reaction of Russian electronic warfare units trying to blind an invisible threat. One Kremlin quietly issued a localized blackout, desperately trying to scramble the satellite guidance systems of incoming Ukrainian long-range strike drones. For the first time in the history of the modern Russian state, the preparation for its greatest military holiday was being dictated not by parade marshals, but by the looming shadow of Ukrainian deep strike capabilities. The message from Kyiv was clear. If Ukraine's cities could not know peace, Moscow would not know the luxury of looking away for years. Vladimir Putin had used the Victory Day parade on Red Square to rally public support, drawing a direct line between the sacrifices of World War II and his current campaign. But as May 9 arrived, the reality on the ground exposed a moment of acute weakness. The grand display of cutting-edge main battle tanks, heavy armor, and massed formations of modern infantry, once the standard fixture of the event, was noticeably stripped back. Instead of rows of advanced T-14 armatas or columns of modern mechanized armor, the parade looked hollowed out, featuring highly scaled-back equipment displays. The skies over the Kremlin, typically roaring with the flypasts of advanced fighter jets and strategic bombers painting the Russian tricolor in smoke, remained eerily quiet. The traditional air show was cancelled entirely. The official explanation blamed weather conditions, but the clear spring sky told a completely different story. The truth was far more embarrassing. Russian commanders could not guarantee that a Ukrainian drone wouldn't intercept a multi-million-dollar fighter jet live on international television, or worse, plunge directly into the viewing stands. The operation that put Putin's parade at risk was not an overnight impulse. It was the culmination of a highly sophisticated multi-week campaign executed by Ukraine's military intelligence and special drone units. Ukraine had been systematically analyzing the structural gaps in the Moscow air defense grid, a network built on the vaunted S-400 Triumph and Pantsir S-1 missile systems. Through highly precise electronic intelligence gathering, Ukrainian operators mapped the blind spots of Russia's long-range radar networks. They realized that by flying domestically produced, long-range kamikaze drones at extremely low altitudes, skimming just above the tree lines and exploiting natural river valleys, they could slide beneath the radar horizons of Russia's heavy defense batteries. Then came the true escalation. Just over a week after the parade, during the night of May 17, 2026, Ukraine launched what international observers and local officials described as one of the largest, most coordinated drone strikes on the Moscow region in more than a year. Dozens of strike drones, engineered with advanced carbon fiber composites to minimize their radar cross-section, slipped across the border. They were built for this specific environment. When Russian electronic warfare units flared to life, flooding the airwaves with high-intensity jamming signals to break the drone's GPS links, the aircraft didn't fall from the sky. Instead, they switched seamlessly to autonomous inertial navigation and optical terrain matching systems. They stopped listening to the outside world entirely, relying on internal microchips preloaded with satellite imagery of the terrain below. They weren't just flying blind, they were hunting with absolute autonomy. As the swarm neared the outer rings of the Moscow Oblast, Russian air defense units panicked. Videos captured by frantic residents in the suburbs of Moscow showed the night sky lit up by the frantic tracer fire of Pantsir autocannons and the bright streaks of surface-to-air missiles launching into the dark. But the sheer volume of the Ukrainian onslaught overwhelmed the localized defenses. while several drones were intercepted, falling in fiery wreckage that damaged residential areas and suburban neighborhoods. Multiple units broke through. The explosions reverberated deep within the Moscow region, sending shockwaves through the local population and shattering the carefully curated illusion of total safety that the Kremlin had spent millions to maintain. For the residents of Moscow, the distant thuds of detonating warheads and the sight of smoke rising on the horizon served as a grim, undeniable reminder that the frontline was no longer confined to the Donbass. The strategic illusion of an untouchable capital has evaporated. Moscow is now a frontline city in terms of air defense priorities, forcing the Russian high command to make agonizing choices between protecting their lines of communication or protecting their seat of power. The psychological fallout of these strikes within Russia's elite circles has been profound. For decades, the social contract under Putin's rule was simple. The population would surrender political autonomy in exchange for economic stability and personal security, insulated from the chaos of foreign entanglements. The sight of smoke over the Moscow region tore that contract to shreds. Behind the stone walls of the Kremlin, the mood turned from confident defiance to deep frustration. The fact that Ukraine could orchestrate a large-scale aerial intrusion during the most heavily secured week of the year was a humiliation that Putin could not easily erase. The subsequent military panic rippled across the entire Russian command structure, sparking finger-pointing between the Ministry of Defense and regional air defense commanders who had failed to seal the skies. In a desperate bid to reassert dominance and project strength back to his domestic audience after the embarrassment of his scaled-back parade, Putin ordered a massive, retaliatory aerial assault on Ukraine. Turning to his strategic reserves, the Russian military launched a staggering combined strike involving over 600 drones and 90 highly advanced missiles, targeting the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv and surrounding areas like Bila Tserkva. Among the weapons deployed was the hypersonic, intermediate-range ballistic missile known as the Oreshnik. The Kremlin explicitly used this multi-warhead system as a terrifying piece of political signaling, attempting to shock Ukraine into submission and warn its Western allies to back down. The missile, descending with immense kinetic energy, struck infrastructure south of Kyiv, while hundreds of Shad-type drones attempted to overwhelm Ukrainian air defense batteries in a brutal 7-hour assault that damaged cultural sites, residential buildings, and civilian infrastructure across every district of the city. Yet Western defense analysts quickly noted that this massive expenditure of advanced Russian rocketry yielded little actual military advantage. Instead of degrading Ukraine's frontline brigades or halting their operational capabilities, the Russian strike was purely symbolic, a multi-million-dollar tantrum designed to soothe the Kremlin's bruised ego. Ukrainian air defenses, heavily fortified by Western-supplied systems and highly organized mobile air defense teams, put up a legendary resistance, intercepting the vast majority of the incoming drone swarms and a high percentage of the cruise missiles. Rather than projecting absolute strength, the use of the rare and expensive Oreshnik against non-military, regional targets only signaled desperation to the international community. It proved that the Kremlin had run out of elegant strategic options and was forcing its military to waste dwindling stockpiles of strategic weapons just to score political points at home. Meanwhile, Ukraine's deep strike strategy has continued to evolve at an aggressive pace. Kyiv didn't blink in the face of the Oreshnik deployment. Instead, the Ukrainian Armed Forces and the Security Service of Ukraine (SBU) doubled down on their asymmetric campaign, shifting focus away from purely symbolic political targets toward the economic and logistical lifelines that fund the Russian war machine. Simultaneously with the drone operations near Moscow, Ukrainian long-range strike UAVs flew deep into the Russian rear, bypassing regional defenses to strike the Vtorovo linear production and dispatching station in the Vladimir Oblast. This facility serves as a vital artery for Russia's domestic oil infrastructure, pumping raw materials from major refineries in central Russia directly to distribution networks and export hubs. The resulting drone impacts ignited a massive 800-square-meter inferno that severely disrupted the pipeline's operational capacity. By systematically targeting Russia's oil refineries, storage depots, and transit hubs, Ukraine is executing a highly methodical economic strangulation campaign. They understand that oil is the literal fuel of the Russian war effort and the primary source of hard currency keeping the Kremlin's economy afloat. Every refinery unit taken offline, every pumping station set ablaze, and every storage tank destroyed forces Russia to divert its dwindling air defense assets away from the front lines in Ukraine to protect critical economic infrastructure deep within its own borders. This creates an impossible dilemma for the Russian General Staff. They can either protect the soldiers on the front lines from Ukrainian tactical aviation, or they can protect the oil refineries in the rear that pay those soldiers' wages. They cannot do both. This rapid technological evolution highlights how Ukraine has effectively neutralized Russia's traditional industrial advantages through innovation and speed. Operating on a fraction of the budget available to the Russian military, Ukrainian engineers have turned the domestic production of long-range drones into a highly streamlined, modular industry. By integrating commercial off-the-shelf components with advanced artificial intelligence algorithms for autonomous terminal targeting, Ukraine has created a fleet of long-range strike weapons that can be produced in hidden workshops across the country. These systems are cheap, highly redundant, and incredibly difficult to detect, allowing Ukraine to wage a high-tech war of attrition against an adversary that remains heavily reliant on rigid Soviet-era military doctrines. As mid-2026 approaches, the entire strategic balance of the air war has fundamentally inverted. Crimea, once considered an unassailable bastion of Russian power projection in the Black Sea, has been turned into a shooting gallery where Russian surface-to-air missile batteries and airbases are systematically dismantled week by week. And now, that same reality is creeping toward Moscow. Control of the skies is no longer determined by the raw number of legacy fighter jets a nation possesses or the pageantry of its military parades. It is measured by information dominance, precision engineering, and the strategic persistence to strike the enemy where they least expect it. By piercing the veil of Moscow's invulnerability, Ukraine has proved to the world, and to the Russian people, that no amount of Kremlin propaganda can hide the simple, burning truth. In this war of endurance, the front lines can now be drawn anywhere Ukraine chooses to strike. Analysis helped you see what's really happening behind the headlines. Hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next breakdown.